Hi there everybody. This is just a really short video because I just picked up a camera the other day. It was an unusual one, I'd not come across it before, and I thought it'd be really cool just to share both the camera but also the fact I managed to get hold of some film for it and try it out. So the camera I'm talking about is this one here. It is the Polaroid J66 Land Camera. And it's been sitting at the bottom of a shelf in a shop near me where they tend to get quite a few old cameras, kind of handed down cameras, and they're not super expensive either. So they're kind of untested, but also you can go in and you can have a play around with them, see if they seem to function. So I've been looking at this one for a little while, and I thought, do you know what? Even if this doesn't work, it's going to be a pretty cool thing just to have on the shelf. I mean, it's probably the biggest instant camera I've ever held, and bearing in mind I converted an RB67 into an Instax camera at one point, this rivals that for size, but it's quite a cool little camera, quite a cool big camera, and I quite like the idea of just giving it a go. Now the big problem with this is that, as the guy who from the shop says, they don't produce the film for this anymore, and they haven't since the 80s. So the challenge was, can I get hold of it and get some film for it? But he wanted £15 for it, and I thought, at £15, I'm going to give it a go and see what comes out at the other end. So this is the camera. Just to give you a little kind of overview of what it's got on it. Very, very simple camera. So it's from the early 60s, I think. It's one of the earliest Polaroid models. You've got a very simple sort of flip up viewfinder. There we go at the top, which just gives you a basic frame line. Let's see if we can make you see through that. But it will just give you a very basic frame line. There you go. So that gives you an idea of what you see through there, and that's it. It's got an automatic exposure on the front, so it's got this selenium photo cell down here, and that goes to a light meter that you can see on top, that at the moment is showing that picture's too dark for the camera to manage, but it's auto exposure. But if I kind of point it that way, it might go up a little bit towards the light. Let's try it that way, towards this light. There you go, you can see that starting to move. So the fact that was working was good news. Its focus is basically two modes. You've either got everything in as a scene mode, just there, or you can squeeze this and pull it out a bit further and it goes to a kind of portrait mode, but not really a portrait mode. You can get to about a meter's distance with this, and it seems to be the closest still focus. It's also got, although I haven't got any flash bulbs, a little flash attachment on the side there. So if you really wanted to, I suppose you could run it with a flash gun as well. So what's the cool thing about this? Well, other than the fact it just looks great and I love it, and it came with its own original leather case, so that was pretty fun. And apparently it came from the Leeds Carriage Works, so it was potentially used at the Carriage Works to kind of take photos of finished carriages, which I thought was pretty cool as well. As somebody who's got a history background, I thought that was a really nice link. I haven't got anything to prove that, but that's apparently the story behind this one. So I really like that. I really like the fact that, despite the fact it's absolutely massive and weighs a ton, that it's sort of this idea of how do we get really instantaneous photography into the hands of lots of people. So I quite like the fact that all over this camera are just instructions for how to use it. So it tells you things like, and everything's numbered. So it tells you, number 1, press the red shutter button to take your photo. Number 2, click your shutter advance on and put that up, so you can see that on the side there is labelled as number 2 here. It's already cocked, so I won't do that again now. And then number 3, we've got this little switch on the back here to allow the film to wind through. And number 4, you open the door on the back and inside you'll find your picture. That's the theory anyway. So that's the camera. It's pretty fun. I like it. I managed to track down some film for this on eBay, which was a minor miracle. So I looked how much Type 47 Polaroid film you can get in the UK. You can get quite a lot in the US, UK not so much. And I think there'd only been one pack I could find had been sold on eBay in the last 6 months. So in the end, I spent a bit more than I was intending to on a couple of packs of out-of-date film. So those got sent over. I mean, really, they were about £30 for 2 packs, which actually is pretty comparable with modern film. The big difference, I think, for me, is that these went out of date in 1986 and 1987 respectively. Plus, I'd never loaded one of these cameras before, didn't know how they work particularly, so just getting that up and running was a challenge, which I'll get to in a minute. So I'll talk about loading the film, I'll cut to a little section on that, and then we'll get back and have a little look at some of those results. Okay, so here's just a close-up of that case I was talking about earlier. Like I say, this is just a bonus extra of £15. It felt great. And you can see inside, there's a lot of space in there, but this is where the camera fits in. Not super easy to get out, I've got to be honest, but it keeps it nice and safe, so that's good. And there's the camera itself. We just had a look at this, but this is a slightly better lit environment, so you can see that lens really nicely at the front there, and just how that folding mechanism works. Pretty standard for these kind of folding out cameras. And just that viewfinder that pops up on top. And if we just come around the side now, and you'll see, there you go, all those instructions, exactly how to use the camera, what order, and so on and so forth. And you can see just inside, that's where the picture will come out when we actually get the film loaded and going in a minute. There we go, and you just squeeze those to put the thing back away. Right, so in terms of the film, this came from an eBay seller, like I said, and this is the box it came in. So it actually looked pretty decent for the age, although there was absolutely no information on how this had been stored. But you can see this one, in fact, went off in October 1986. So that is, what, about 37 years ago, isn't it? And there we go, you can see it uses a caustic jelly, which I discovered, and you will see shortly that I discovered quite quickly, gets absolutely everywhere if you're not very careful. So I've got kids around the house, so I did spend a lot of my time cleaning up after this. That's the box itself opening up, and you can see the instructions here. Again, really warn you about this caustic jelly that's inside. And it also says, as I kind of should have expected, that you need to load this up in a darkened environment. Which I'd not really factored as I stood doing this in the window. So anyway, you pull down the lever on the front of the camera, it opens it up, and you can see inside there more instructions in case you're not sure what you should be doing. And this kind of opens out like a bit of a concertina, and you drop your film in two halves into the back of the camera there, as you can see. And you load it up. Now, there are videos you can get for this online, so if you want to see how to load it, please go and find one of those. I had to go and do this in a more darkened place so that I could get it in there without causing too much damage to the film. Although, as it turns out, I needn't have bothered because it didn't really work fantastically for the first time, as you will see very shortly. So anyway, that's what happens. This is what the film looks like inside. You can see it actually is in pretty decent condition inside the wrapper. And it comes in this kind of double roll setup, which you then open up, and it comes out with a smaller roll, which you can see on the left-hand side of the screen at the moment, but that will end up in the right-hand side of the camera, the way we're looking at it here. And on the other side, you get this bigger roll. So the little roll contains the film negative, and the big roll contains the chemicals and the actual photo sheet that this is going to be printed onto. And you can see that it's ultra high speed. It's filmed actually pretty fast at 3000 ISO for its day. So that's going to drop into the camera. But I did, as I say, have to go off into a darkened room to load that. Once you've done that, then your camera's loaded up. It's simply a case then of pulling through the leader. So this actually all went pretty smoothly. So you can see I'm pulling through the leader there, and you can see it's got the negative side, which is the black, and the side which has the photo on, which is the white. And you just kind of pull up that door and then close it down and tear off. I'd seen a few other people really struggling to get that to work, but this seemed to work pretty well on mine. There was just a little bit of sort of extra sellotape. It's not really all that clear because it kind of seems to tear off a spot it shouldn't. It wasn't super clear whether that had gone off in the right place, but it seemed to be okay. You can now see that I've got gloves. After 2 failed attempts with photographs ending up with jelly all over my fingers, I decided just to play it safe. So this time I've taken a photograph, and the aim was to see if I could get it to actually work. So you can see I'm pulling the leader through, and this is where I should have had the warning sign. So you can see that black leader there has torn off. Very clean, it's just snapped basically inside, but that should have the negative attached to it. The fact it's there means the negative is still basically stuck inside the camera, not going anywhere, whilst the roll with the caustic jelly on it is coming through. So you can see now when I open up the camera exactly what that's going to result in. So here's where it should be the folder, and I had gloves on and realised I couldn't actually get the photograph off, so I had to take that off. So as I pull this away now, you will see there's no negative at all there. So all I've got is caustic jelly all over a sheet of photographic paper and a really messy camera inside. So after this, took that off, And I actually had to undo the camera completely and go inside and clean it up. And I had to open it in a darkened place and basically try and reattach the negative roll to the leader roll that's got the caustic jelly on it. And I did manage to do that, but not before the roll ran out. So that was the first film gone, basically. And then I got onto the second film, managed a little bit better this time. The exact same thing happened though. So after the first picture came out, it failed because the negative roll hadn't attached, and I had to go back in, open the camera back up again and reattach it. Once I did that, and after I lost that first shot, well, in fact it was the first two shots because one got ruined by opening the camera, I did get my first picture. This isn't the first picture because I didn't manage to photograph that one, but this is, I think, the second or third picture I got out of the camera once I was sure it was working. So you can see I've left that this time for about 30-40 seconds, I think, on this one. And you open up the camera, you peel away, and then you actually get a photograph inside. Now this one is not fantastic. This was taken outside the normal aperture, and you can see it's really curly when it comes out and very, very grainy. I will talk you through the pictures I got at the end. One of the things you do have to do is straighten them out. So you have to kind of roll them over a table edge because they curl, and it does recommend you do that in the instructions as well. And then once you've done that, you do have to coat them. So I'll show you that with this next one. So this was the next photo, now developing. I did this for much longer this time for the developing because the chemicals are so old, and it did work a little bit better. So again, just tearing in, lifting that off, and you can see this time we actually have a working picture. Not an exciting picture, but a working picture. And again, you can see it's really curly because it's come off that roll. But you straighten it out by rolling around the table edge, and then you get this little pot, and inside that pot you get a little, well, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a sponge inside a little pot which has a kind of resin on it. I'm not even sure what it is, if I'm honest. And you just have to kind of rub it over the picture 7, 8, 9 times in straight lines. So that does two things. One, it cleans off the gunk that's still attached to the picture itself. And number two, it puts this protective coating over the top, which stays sticky for quite some time and then eventually dries off and leaves you with like a, if I'm honest, slightly bubbly coating over your picture, but it might be that it was just very old, or I did it badly, one or the other. But anyway, that's what you have to do with your pictures when they come out. So that's another one. And then you can see there's a little bit of development there, but a little bit more sign that this was working and was likely to work. Certainly there's nothing wrong, I don't think, with the exposure of the camera. It's exposing it correctly. I did widen the aperture on that one as well, which is why the light's a little bit blown out, I think. But nothing wrong with the camera. It's mainly the chemicals and the film that's the problem there, I think. So final one, just to show you, this one opens up, and this was probably the best of the set that I did in this sitting before it became too dark to do any more. And you see this one has actually come out, which is quite exciting actually. And that just needed, again, a little bit of a clean up and a little bit of a resin coat. Okay, so you've kind of seen how the film loaded. You've seen some of what happened as a result of trying those things out. One thing that became really apparent really quickly was that because the film was so old, yes, absolutely, it was going to have trouble developing, and I'll tell you how I adjusted some of those times. But also just the basic mechanical nature of the film, the two halves. So you've got a half that's a picture negative, and you've got a half that is the kind of the actual photo, and those two need to roll through together. And what was happening was, as I pulled through the roll to begin with in this camera, it was tearing the negative, was tearing off the actual advancing roll. So for the first roll, first time I'd run it through, it was coming out, I was looking in the picture door, and as you saw before, I was just getting this kind of gel all over the place and no picture at all, no negative transferring over. So the picture ended up blank and the developing gel just ended up all over the inside of the camera. And it took me a couple of photos to work out what on earth was going on. I thought I'd done something wrong initially. Ended up having to open it up, sellotape the two halves back together and pull it through. But by the time I'd done all that, the first roll was pretty much done and wasted. The second roll I had much more success with, although it did exactly the same thing again. So the old sellotape that holds the two together just kind of pulled apart and the thing tore and it just didn't come out. So if you get one of these and you get that Type 47 film, I'd recommend probably just wasting your first shot. So rather than pulling it through initially and then taking your photos, I would pull it through, and if a piece of black, which is the backing, comes away, that means your roll is detached and you need to go in and you need to reset it and you need to stick it back together and make sure it comes through. What I'd probably recommend doing is, rather than just taking through the small amount, it recommends I take more through the first time. And that probably will just hold it together, because the backing paper has a thin section for some reason. It's probably there for a purpose, but it's very weakly connected, and that's what tears, and it tore on both of my rolls of film. Anyway, I still got some photos out of it in the end. They're not stellar. This is not a camera I'm going to be coming back to and using very much, I don't think, but I just kind of like the fact it works. If there's an enthusiast out there that wants to convert this to an Instax camera, or a Polaroid camera, I now know it does work and they can have a go at that. Or if they just like old stuff and they like a functioning camera, I suppose it'd be great to give on to somebody who would like that as well. So I'm going to take you through the shots I did get. This was the first one, and you can see that there did not come out particularly well. So this was just straight out of the window. And what I wanted to do with this one was just use the natural light that was out there, because I knew there'd be enough light there in order to take a photograph. The lens itself is a plastic one. It's not particularly great quality. Like I say, you've only got those two focusing zones you can go to, and there's no way really of telling what shutter speed it's going to use. So for this, I'm pretty sure it's metered for the sky. And therefore we've got this really kind of dark, well, really dark. We've got this dark foreground and we've got this sort of blown out sky, which you kind of expect for ISO 3000 film. So that was kind of mistake number one, but this is the first photo that came out, so I was pretty pleased. That was done for the recommended developing time of around 10 to 15 seconds. And you can see, because those chemicals are so old, yeah, that's basically not long enough at all for that. So there is a little bit of detail coming through here, but not a lot. And you can see that the even where it's supposed to be black, it's not coming out black at all. It's kind of very pale grey. So that was the first one, proof of concept. The other funny thing about these, and you'll see me do this in the kind of roll that you saw before, is you have to coat them. So when they come out, they're kind of covered in the photographic gel, and then you have to kind of use this little wiper that wipes off the gunk, but also puts a kind of coating over this. I have no idea what is in that, or even if it's toxic or non-toxic or safe, but you kind of wipe it over the surface, and then that eventually dries, and you end up with your picture with a kind of resinal coating over or something like that. So we'll have to see how well that lasts. Not that these are going up on the wall. So that was the first one. The second one that came out was this one. So in this one, I tried an indoor shot. And what I tried with this one, actually, and you can see that's come out a tiny bit better. I'll try and get a good angle on it. So that was the chair in my living room. And again, this was more just a test shot to see if I could get it to take. I did try and do this with the flash at the same time, but because there's no flash sync port, I literally pressed the button and pressed my flash at the same moment. I did meter for the flash I would need, but I suspect I mistimed that. And probably what you've got there is a 1/15 of a second exposure of the armchair, which came out. But again, I did slightly longer development for this one, so I let this one sit for about 25 seconds. But once again, you can see it's not quite good enough, or not quite enough time to let that come out properly. But getting closer. The third one, I decided to take outside because I thought, maybe what we need is a bit more natural light. I did this back at the normal aperture setting. So for these two that I've just shown you, I'd opened up the aperture a little bit from the normal setting. So I think, as far as there's not a lot of information on this camera, I think it's a fixed f/19 lens when it's wide open, which is obviously not very fast at all. And I've no idea what aperture it is when it's set to its normal setting. So if I just show you that now, you see the lens on here has this little red dot, and you can set it to normal, which is what you're supposed to use it on, and then you can sort of go either way to darken or lighten, and you can see just that aperture opens or closes. So for this one, I decided to set it back to normal because I was outside proper, and just take a picture of my daughter, who very dutifully came out to pose. Again, I'm not sure what happened with this. You can just about make her out in there. You get just a little bit of detail in the background here of the house behind, and again, most of it is just shadow. I wonder again if that light meter is just picking up that sky, even though I wasn't really pointing it at the sky, but maybe it took that sky as the metering point. Not really sure, or it could be just that it's because it's really old film that it wasn't enough light to go onto it anyway. So chalk that one up to experience, but I did develop that for longer, about a minute, and you can see it's not quite as pale as some of the others. So you can see there, look, we've got a minute on that one and about 25 seconds on that one, and there is a bit darker, the blacks are deeper in that one. I thought, oh, okay, so maybe actually the chemicals are that old that they need quite a bit of time to develop, because we're getting that failure happening. Then I tried something very different. I thought, well, what if I go in and give it all the light it definitely needs, but for something that's supposed to be bright? So I went and took a picture of my lamp. This is not the world's most exciting photo, but really what I wanted was a proof of it working. So I knew when I took this one that because it was quite dark inside, it was going to default to its slower shutter speed anyway. And I then opened up the aperture to the wider setting as well. And this is what I got for this one. This is probably the best one so far. And you can see there that the light is obviously blown out because I've opened the aperture wider than it should have been for this. But interestingly, in the background here is a bit of my radiator, and that was about the right exposure for I'd expect for that photo. So this was a little proof that I could get it to work, which was great. I developed that for 2 minutes, and you can see there's a bit more detail actually developed out of that one. And I know you can see it's very blotchy, but if you kind of move this in, you can start to see a little bit of the detail coming out, which is really good, really nice to see. And it was great to actually open a photo and for something to come out for the first time. But what I then did was I took my light meter and I metered by that radiator at f19 to see what shutter speed it should be going at. And it suggested 1/20th of a second for that radiator. So I was like, okay, so that's probably about right. So what I'm needing to do for this at 1/15 is to open that aperture right up. And then the final shot that I managed to take, which worked slightly better, was just in my kitchen. And this one actually has some detail, again, because it's such an old piece of film. Sorry, that reflection's awful. Because it's such an old piece of film, you can see the quality is really dreadful, but we have actually got something here. And this was at its 1/15th of a second, in that reasonably bright indoor light in the kitchen, but with the aperture set wide open. And it has just about captured something that resembles a photograph with some depth in it. That one I left for 4.5, if not 5 minutes to develop. And I think that's probably at the maximum it would get out of anything there. I think any longer is not going to do an awful lot more, but that feels like it's developed a reasonable amount of detail. So those are my 5 shots. I now have 1 remaining. If I take that before I post this video, I will try and show you what happened with that one. But now I've got a set of ideas for how I can take this forwards. I hope you enjoyed that. If you've got this camera, I'd love to know what you get on with or what you do with it. If you're using Type 47 film, I'd love to know how you get on with that as well. I don't think it's something I'm going to be carrying on with, but I hope this has been an interesting thing for you to have a look at anyway. All right, thanks so much for watching. Cheers.